At AutoCon 1, NetBox Labs announced the NetBox Cloud free plan to give everyone a SaaS option to run NetBox.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you're having fun at AutoCon. So today we're going to talk about how the future of network automation is open and composable. Network automation can seem very daunting. Steinsy pointed it out in his talk just now. Apparently Ansible isn't cool anymore. Who knew that, right? As we move through these changes in industries, what we find out is that we're sort of overwhelmed with decisions. But it's not just in networking, right? It's happened before. I've experienced this as a software engineer earlier in my career. So I'm going to take you through a little story of how that happened. We're going to go all the way back to 1999. Total Control Games magazine, the best games of the millennium revealed. And if you go to page 60, who's that dork, top right? That's baby me. And baby me loved computer games, and more so making computer games. I used to spend a whole bunch of time making modifications for Half-Life, and I would sit there for hours on end in a state of basically bliss. But there was something that I liked even more than that. Who knows who this guy is? It is John Carmack, the lead programmer at id Software. They made Doom, they made Quake, and this guy was my absolute hero. So much so that when I was asked in that magazine interview what my favorite role would be in the future, I said my favorite role would be to be him. So what is it that I liked about John Carmack so much? Well, it wasn't just that he was a programmer, it's the way that he did it. To me, John Carmack was this sort of mythical figure, right? He did everything on his own. Very few people around him changed the computer game industry, just him and his computer. He was a cowboy with a BFG 9000, with a Doom t-shirt, and I wanted to be him. And, for a while, that's actually how my life went. I was making modifications for these games on my PC. Then I went to university. I was working on my own a lot there. Then I got into computer games as a job, and a lot of it was small team stuff, and I was very happy. But then, in 2006, I moved to Amsterdam. I got a new job. And I came here to work for TomTom. And TomTom was a very different kettle of fish. It wasn't just me on my PC. Literally the way I used to develop and deliver software was I would compile it on my PC. I would test it by playing the game myself. And then I would ship it to someone else who also had a PC that wasn't dissimilar to mine. Now I was working with thousands of developers, shipping software all over the world to people in different languages, different operating systems, some of it online, some of it in little boxes stuck inside your car. We all had to collaborate. We all had to have testing. Testing did not exist in my life before this. We had to have version control. We had to have change control boards. We had to have all sorts of other things, right? And the reason why is because different challenges need different approaches, right? And I think this is kind of what a lot of us are feeling in the network automation community at the moment, right? We were very happy doing show commands, and now suddenly our networks are growing, we've got to have less outages, and we're being asked to change. We see this in all the acronyms that are popping up, right? So the one that I was forced to live through, but now actually love, is DevOps. But we also have NetOps, NetSecOps, NetDevOps, DevNetOps, all of these things, right? They're just it would be better if all these people work together better, right? That's the whole point of all of these things, because at scale, we need all of these functions to work together neatly. So it's all about collaboration. And NetBox Labs, it's our mission to make it easier to build and manage complex networks. And what that means is that we spend a lot of time looking at how we can make collaboration easier. How do we help people to scale their systems by building open and composable systems where they can collaborate with their partners? And we're going to look at how we try to do this and where we see this happening across a few different layers. The first is collaboration with our huge community. Put your hands up if you're a NetBox user. There we go, big community. So one of our core values is community first. What that really means is when we're making decisions inside the company, we're thinking, how does this impact the community? How does this help the community? Second is what we call the virtuous circle. We're a commercial business, right? We're in the business of making money. But the reason why we're here is because of all the work that came before us with Jeremy and all of you users in the open source community. As we start to sell products like NetBox Cloud, we generate revenue and we reinvest that revenue into the open source community so that the whole thing can grow virtuously. And we'll see a couple of examples of that in a minute. And then the big tent philosophy is core to a lot of the things that we'll do. And you'll see some specific examples of this in a moment, but we really seek to play nice with everybody else in the industry. And the reason why is because we think everybody needs open and composable systems, right? So we try to make the tent bigger, to make sure that we're easy to integrate with, to have lots of partners in lots of areas, so that we can give operators like you more choices about the tools that you include in your open and composable systems. Another example of collaborating with the community started at the beginning of 2023. So at the beginning of 2023, we were like, why isn't there a network automation conference? So we created one. We made NetDevOps Days. And in May or June of last year, NetDevOps Days London happened, and it was a great success. And Steinsy presented with the usual energy. There he is. And then we did another one in New York. And then AutoCon popped up. And it was never our intention to run a conference. We just wanted there to be one. So the first thing we did is we called Scott and Chris, and we said, could we join forces? And that's what we did. Yeah. Continuing on the collaboration with the community theme, yesterday you might have seen that we released a free tier, right? Like as people are getting into network automation and trying to figure out how all this fits together, there's nothing worse than it being difficult to even try the thing in the first place. So we're lowering the barrier to getting started with NetBox by giving a free tier, free in perpetuity if you give us a credit card, and you can go and use that. It's production ready. You can scale up, you can get started, and then you can grow from there. We also seek to be very collaborative with our users, right? We have a huge open source customer base, user base. We also have a bunch of customers. Some of them were previously open source users. Some of them are brand new to NetBox Cloud. And this is kind of a brief overview of our product and feature lifecycle. But basically what it shows is that from the very beginning, even when things are internal, we call this experimental. We're sharing with the community, right? And I'll give you a good example of this. A few months ago, people started talking about version control in the NetDev Slack. And this got into a public, you can go and see it. This is how a lot of our product decisions begin. We're talking in the open, we're figuring out with the community what we want. And this process has now led to some great news, which is that in NetBox 4.1, in August of this year, we're introducing stage changes, which gives you version control, branching, merging, diffing, and everything else that you would need to be able to collaborate with your colleagues. So plugin bounty program. There's a huge number of people in the community who want additions to NetBox. We've created a plugin leaderboard. People can put their ideas there, and then they can go and vote for them. We discuss these in the usual process that we would for any other feature with the community. And then once we've figured out, okay, we understand what this plugin is supposed to be for, or this extension, we then put a bounty out on it. And I don't know if we've got Alex Gittins here. There you are. Big round of applause for Alex Gittins, please. He's not sure what I'm going to say next yet. It's a big round of applause for being the most recent recipient of our plugin bounty. So thank you for that. And this is just another way that we're working with the community to make sure that we're constantly building integrations into the NetBox ecosystem. People who build plugins for the ecosystem basically face two challenges. One, they've got, well, I guess three. They've got to maintain them. But after that, they've got to make sure that people can find them. One of the things about having such a huge and open community is there's a lot of stuff going on. So we introduced the NetBox certification program, which means that we work with plugin developers to make sure that not only are their plugins discoverable and people can understand what they do, but also we stand behind them so that they're supported, which means that they're not then having to maintain that plugin on their own for the whole community. It means that the rest of the community gets better assurances around quality, and the plugin maintainers themselves get a helping hand from us. We have a huge focus on partner collaboration. I'll come to a slide in a minute because I think most of them are actually here. This is just a little excerpt from a recent survey from Enterprise Management Associates. Some of you will be familiar with Seamus McGillicuddy there, who does a lot of good work. And basically what he saw in the survey is that most companies who are successful with network automation have multiple network automation tools in their stack, right? Like being open and composable is built in to success in network automation. And this is what we're enabling through our open and composable ecosystem. So just, I've seen Slurpit, I've seen SUSE-Q, I've seen IP Fabric, I'm going to say that probably everyone on this chart is here today, and we're constantly expanding this. If you're on our newsletter, you'll have noticed that our newsletters are getting longer and longer every month as we add more and more and more partners to plugins and integrations, so that when you use NetBox or any of these other tools, you can easily advance your network automation initiatives by integrating with these other tools and not having to do the work yourself. So we're almost at the end. If you are coming into network automation and you're feeling a little bit like 24-year-old me, like I just wish we could go back to how it used to be, there's a lot of new challenges, there's a lot of things you've got to learn. Don't worry. The future of network automation is open and composable. And it's happening right now, right? It's happening in this room. We're trying to enable it as much as we can. But when I see all of our partners in the room, when I see all of the great conversations that are happening here, I think this is the right time for everyone to be sharing their ideas and helping each other to succeed with network automation. And Dali did me a favor with this one. Big tent, we're no longer alone, and we're all going to AutoCon. So thank you very much.
After Mark Coleman's announcement from the AutoCon 1 stage, I sat down with Mark to get more details. Talk to us about the NetBox Labs Cloud free plan. What am I getting?
Yeah, right. So this was released yesterday at AutoCon. Basically, the idea is to lower the barrier for anybody to use NetBox. So NetBox is already available open source.
Yeah.
You can run it from the instructions. You can run it through Docker Compose. You can run it through Kubernetes. We maintain all of these things. But for some people, that's too much work, or they're just not able to do that, right? They're not command line people. So we wanted to make sure that we lowered the barrier for everybody using NetBox, and that's what we do with the NetBox Cloud free plan. What's included is a real deal NetBox Cloud instance, right? It's running on the same infrastructure that anybody would get if they were paying us for a NetBox Cloud instance. But it's limited by scale, right? So it's up to 100 devices. That's a scale that we use in scaling our commercial tiers as well. And as we do with all of these things, we built it out with the community, and we said what would be like big enough to get started and do most of the sort of back and napkin experiments you want to get moving quickly with. And they agreed with that. The other limitations are we don't make all of the certified plugins available. There are some certified plugins that are only available in the commercial tiers. And the way that it works is you give us a credit card. And if you go over your limit, you get a whole bunch of very nice emails. And at some point, if you say, well, no, I've actually deliberately gone over my limit, I'd like to pay, then you can scale up with the credit card without speaking to sales. You can go that way. Or you may decide at some point, I want like an annual plan. And then you can come and speak through our normal channels.
Okay, yeah, that was actually a question I had. If I wanted to go off the free plan and just keep using what I've got, I don't have to go to a different product. It's the same product. Now it's just I can go bigger.
Exactly the same instance. Yeah, the only thing we do differently from an infrastructure perspective is, we have a bunch of these things on standby so that when someone signs up, they get it just like that. And we have some functionality in there to sort of spin down stale instances so we're not paying for them. But other than that, you're getting a real deal NetBox Cloud instance, but it's got a couple of limitations in there.
If I'm a home lab enthusiast and I want to use the NetBox Cloud plan here, how do I connect that instance back to whatever the lab is that I want to discover?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of options there. So if you look at the way that our discovery partners, IP Fabric, Forward Network, SUSE-Q, and Slurpit have solved this, coming from the cloud into an on-prem situation is a little tricky. Maybe it's a home network and I don't get to control which IPs come into my network via my ISP or which ports. Or maybe, I just don't want to be punching holes in my firewall for that to happen. So in all of those circumstances, they've built plugins for NetBox that run in the cloud. And then their agents that are running in the network call back out and send data that way. So we have a call out to NetBox Cloud discovery capability.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, can I do that with the free version of the plan if I want to?
You can do that with the free tier of the plan if the plugin is included, and I don't have the exact matrix in front of me, but some of them are. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. The other thing is that's only if you want the functionality where you have like the whole plugin in NetBox. A lot of these discovery tools will very happily just point to a NetBox endpoint. So if you just give them the URL of your cloud instance and your administration token, they'll very happily send data over there anyway. But to get like the added plugins that they built, which have some of the workflows in, that one we need to double check.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds pretty full featured. Just restricted based on scale.
That's right.
And I can grow right into it. I need to give you a credit card number that you're not going to charge. You're going to send me a lot of, you just said, nice emails before any charges happen. But you want that credit card on record.
Yeah. So this comes from some previous experience in other areas. Actually, the first 14 days, you don't need to give a credit card. You can use it as much as you want. But after any time in that 14 days, you need to give us a credit card so that you can use it in perpetuity. And the reason why is, we kind of joke internally, we just don't want it to become a fraud tier. I worked at a few companies in the past with these kind of programs, and without some sort of gate to filter people who are signing up very quickly, it can get a little bit messy. So we need something in there just to make sure that we're not being abused.
Mark, in your talk, you said the word composable quite a bit.
The future of networking, network automation is open and composable.
So how do you mean composable? Like we had composable infrastructure as a buzzword in the industry, I don't know, a decade ago or something like that. Do you mean it like that? Do you mean extensible? How do you mean composable?
Kind of all of the above, right? So in the talk, that was a little more than a decade ago, but I was kind of going through that initial DevOps wave. And I think, that was also the surgence of open source in a big way for a lot of people around then. So, what we mean by composable is we will, as part of the big tent, philosophy that we have, we aim to make it easy to integrate with us. And strategically, we aim to work with all of these partners to bring a composed service together. So you just touched on one, right? The discoverability. We could have gone and built our own discoverability tool, but instead we realized there's a bunch of good products already there. Let's go partner with them, bring them into our partner ecosystem, and that applies, on all sides. Like we've done integrations with ServiceNow. I believe Jira is coming up on the operations side. We've got a whole tranche of monitoring tools coming in and monitoring observability and assurance. And then on the automation side, we've got some exciting announcements coming up next week at Cisco Live around some of the partnerships that are happening there. So really, whenever we see a problem where a customer needs to combine NetBox and another type of tool to be able to get their job done, our first instinct is who's already doing that and how do we integrate with them? So that's the composability. Yeah. I think extensibility is kind of like how we do it, right? So we focus on the API, making sure that the Python SDKs and the Go SDKs are good. We've introduced a feature called Diode, which makes it really easy to push large volumes of data into NetBox. And that's more like the how we do the composability.
All right, Mark, explain the partner ecosystem. If I want to develop for NetBox, is there an SDK? Is there a process to it? How do I get into that world?
There's sort of two things here. One is the partner ecosystem, and then the other is how they integrate with us, right? So, and plugins is one way to do that. So, some of the discoverability partners like Slurp, IP Fabric, Forward Networks, and Suzy Q that I mentioned earlier, some of them went ahead and created a plugin. And the way you do that is there's a whole tutorial. There's many other examples online where you can sort of see example code. Often you can just copy and paste huge parts of them because you need similar functionality, and it's really only just the bits that are different about your application that you need to change. So that's that line. But not all of them use plugins. Sometimes partners will deliver solutions where perhaps the plugin lives on their side, right? And all they're doing is calling out to our endpoints and using maybe the Python SDK or something else. If they don't need to add any functionality into NetBox, and sometimes the integrations are kind of fancy scripts that run somewhere and make sure that data is synced occasionally. So it kind of depends on the use case, but there's multiple options for that. Yeah.
As far as tools that I have that help me integrate with NetBox, you mentioned documentation. You mentioned there's examples out there, tutorials, and all that stuff. Did you say SDKs?
Two, yeah. So there's PyNetBox, the Python NetBox library. That's been around for a while. That's very mature now, and that's pretty much everybody's go-to because Python's so popular in network automation. But we also maintain a Go library because we're seeing that sort of come out of the cloud world a little bit and get more popular. So that's another example that people can use. And then the typical model is like use the SDK, and then if there's maybe some endpoint that isn't there, like maybe it's a new thing that was just added and we haven't quite caught up yet, like the whole API is extremely well documented. So it's kind of a common pattern to see, 98% of the integration be using the SDK, and then maybe just a couple of things are using like standard REST calls just to figure out the rest of it and maybe get around some compatibility stuff.
All right, Mark, let's talk about philosophy. In your talk, you mentioned open and basically user first, kind of a user first philosophy. The people that are using NetBox, how are they going to react to this change or this plugin or whatever it might be? Yeah. So if I want to develop on NetBox, I mean, maybe I'm thinking about it commercially. Is there a tension between open and open source and user first and me wanting to make a plugin or extend NetBox? Yeah. In a way where I'm going to get paid someday. I'm going to make money as a NetBox developer.
Yeah, so there's sort of a scale there. In the talk, I spoke about the plugin bounty program and the plugin certification program. So they're kind of related because NetBox already had a huge number of plugins, and we want more, right? We've got an ideas board which has got like 85 things on it and growing all the time, and people are busily like discussing them and voting and everything else. And sometimes, we work with them to be like, hey, number 3 and number 7 seem like kind of the same deal. Like, could you guys work together on this idea and come with the same plugin? So the plugin bounty program essentially takes those ideas and makes them available as bounties to the community. So I mentioned in my talk, Alex Gittins from IP Fabric. He spends all his time at work coding and then all his time not at work coding, right? So in the evenings, he had this idea for a NetBox plugin, and we loved it. It was about reordering racks. So he did that. We inspected it and we paid out the bounty. Now that's not like it's commercial, right? Like we made I think $100,000 available for the community fund in general, and I think there's like 20 of it earmarked for this initiative until we see how it goes. I think this is probably the 3rd one now. But then if you think about the next step, it's like, well, I've got a plugin. Like how does anyone find it? And how do people know they can trust it? So that's where we introduced the certification program, right? Because the certification program essentially says, here's a list of all the plugins that we certify, and then we actually stand behind them as well. So we work with the plugin developers so that if they've got problems or maybe they're on vacation and we just did an upgrade, our developers can step in so that the users of the plugins can know that these things are always going to work.
So what does certification of the plugin mean? Does that mean the code's all been reviewed and it's secure and not malicious? Or what does it mean?
That's exactly right. So, we'll take a look at the repo to be able to offer the kind of support that we want to give to the plugin developers and to the users. Typically what we'll do is we'll take the plugin and put it in our GitHub repo, or we'll just have like maintainer access to their repo so that if, somebody gets hit by a bus or they go on holiday and there's a security vulnerability, we can step in to fix it. So there's kind of an access and ownership part to this to make sure that we can support. There's a licensing check. Are there any weird licenses in there that people wouldn't maybe want to use? There's a code review. There's automated scanning. It's similar to a lot of other plugin certification programs, but it's really making sure like we've got this baseline of understanding, and then we evolve it as we go.
That you could support it. You look at that code and go,
nothing in here we couldn't fix. Yeah,
right.
That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, on the other side with commercial, if this, it's not always the case, but the majority of plugins are built by individual engineers with an itch to scratch. Right? But then, increasingly, as we kind of roll out our Big Tent strategy, there's companies behind these plugins, and I think that's why we are so insistent on talking about this so often, and then demonstrating that this is how we're working. Right? Like we're staying very much in our lane. We're a source of truth. You guys do this better. And I think that's why we see so many partners here, coming over to us today, and why we're doing so many deals together, because NetBox has this huge ecosystem. The partners see that. The integrations make this composability easier. And from a commercial perspective for, commercial entities, that works out for everybody.
So if I want to make money on my plugin, that's possible, but I have to understand, again, the overriding open and user-first philosophy.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there are really any examples of where people have misbehaved in this system. But if you want to make money from it, I mean, when we certify a plugin and put it in our sort of marketplace, like our list, like it's not like the Apple Store, right? Like we're not taking a cut.
Yeah,
we're just making sure that it's available. If that happens to drive sales for the person on the other end of that partnership, That's fantastic, right?
Mhm.
And we're not involved in that. Now, sometimes we will do co-marketing, because often the reason why we want to do these partnerships is because there's some kind of better together story in there. So we'll work with them to, expose our community to theirs and theirs to ours and that sort of thing. But we don't, there's no like Apple Store 30% or whatever that is. Yeah.
And more to the point, I guess my plugin doesn't have to be free.
It doesn't have to be free.
Yeah,
No, that's
okay.
right. Yeah, they could be paid on that end. But then it would be, it depends. Like, do you want a lot of people to use it and give you feedback, or do you want them to only use it when
Right.
you've already sold them, right? And that's like a classic question.
Or it could be a freemium model.
It could be a freemium model like Slurpit and NetPicker.
Yeah.
They're doing great.
And,
with that.
and it's basically what NetBox is as well. There's NetBox,
right.
and there's several paid tiers, and NetBox Enterprise, right? And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the free plan fits right into that freemium idea. And we never really had that before. And that's why it's such an important gap to fill, because it's one thing to get NetBox up and running on your laptop. It's quite another to take it to work and show that it's working. And if we can just remove all the messing around on the command line stuff, it means they can focus on demonstrating value and figuring out if this is a good fit. So that kind of works for everybody.
To sign up for a free NetBox Labs account and get your very own SaaS instance of NetBox provisioned instantly, go to signup.netboxlabs.com.